Well. Trigger warning. At Created Worthy, we honor and protect the stories that are both shared and heard here. This episode contains discussions of sensitive and potentially triggering topics, including domestic violence, religious abuse, physical violence, sexual assault, eating disorders, and kidnapping. We understand that these topics may be difficult for some listeners, so we encourage you to care for your heart and your mind as you engage with this episode. If at any point you need to pause, step away, return at another time, or just skip this episode, we understand. Please feel free to do so. Our goal is always to create a safe and respectful space for stories to be shared with dignity and heard with compassion. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey. Hey friend, I'm Danielle Damrell, and I am so grateful that you're listening to the Created Worthy podcast. This show is all about honoring the life stories of women from different ages, beliefs, backgrounds, and experiences. Everyone's got a story, and instead of getting stuck in the trap of unworthiness, this is a safe place for stories to be shared. On this show, we chat about the transformative power of creative processing too, and how we can utilize our God-given creativity with intention to heal, grow, find joy, create simplicity in the midst of our chaotic lives. So pull up a seat at our table because we are all created worthy. Hello, welcome back to Allison's story. This is part 2 of a obviously 2-part episode. If you missed part 1 of Allison's story, I want to encourage you to go back to the episode that was released just before this. Listen to her background. Listen to what she went through before this next portion of the story. But without further ado, we're going to jump right back in.
So I think this is where I left off. I wrangle him into bed. I don't even ask any questions about the makeup, by the way, because I know that would provoke him. So I was just like, okay, this is normal. And just put him to sleep like a little baby. And he rolls over and he goes, my parents are going to be here in the morning. And I didn't believe him. I was just like, this is part of the psychosis. And then I wake up in the morning, he's a little more coherent, but not really. And he goes, "They're gonna be here at 12." And I text them and they're like, "Yeah, we're gonna be taking him for a month," which is insane. They something I like I said, whatever he said to them that made them come was terrible enough that they were gonna take him for a whole month. And I oh my gosh, the energy in me, I was like the energy bunny packing his stuff, and I was like, It's okay, you take your time. You could stay with them more than a month." They were taking him to Chicago or Illinois, and I was like, "This is the craziest thing that this is happening right now." Because I would have had how difficult it would have been if he had been there vacating the apartment, just everything about it, all of the layers of, like,
Yeah.
attachment. I would be afraid for my life. So, for 1 month, they take him away. By the way, they left me in squalor. He was a garbage hoarder too, and I couldn't keep up with it. We'd have 15 bags of garbage. So I was humiliated when that was something that, like, my dad saw a couple of times, and he was like, "That's bad, Allison," but no one knew the extent. He had jars of cat food under the bed, and he would just throw garbage on the ground. So it was disgusting. Smelled like cat pee. It was awful. And they looked at me and they're like, "We're so sorry. It's only gonna be a month." They were like telling me like as if I was like, "Your son just said something about killing me involved. And you're telling me that," like, I had just been walked through his diagnosis. And I'm thinking, I need to keep his family safe because I'm realizing what I'm with. And I don't remember if it was before or after they took him, but it was around that time because I stayed with him a month after. the strangling. And my mom, I remember when I was at her house, sorry, jumping back a little bit, I had the hand marks around my neck, trigger warning, and I let her take a picture, which she said, "That's when I saw that you were ready to get out of this." And
Mhm.
slowly,
Right.
it
It's a
was a slow
process.
process, even just getting to the point where, and then even that was the beginning of everything. And so once my therapist walked me through his diagnosis, so it must have been right before he left. I Once I knew that he never loved me, was incapable of loving me, and that he enjoyed my pain, that he fed off of it, that he was unfit to ever make the commitment of marriage to a person mentally unfit, that his parents were just as abusive to him and just as much a threat to my life. All of these things being told, that really the main thing being he never loved you. That was like it set me free and everything made sense. It was like that was the biggest tool in getting me out of it, was realizing, and that once that veil was lifted, and I've experienced that a few times with the
Mhm.
narcissist and the consequential situations that I got in thereafter with narcissists. 'Cause I've been with a couple, which is common if you've been through it once, especially to the extent of that duration. And every time it took a shorter amount of time for that veil to be lifted. And that feeling, luckily, for me, and this is not the case for a lot of people, and I'm lucky that this is the case for me, but I had not one romantic feeling. I didn't miss him. I started despising him.
Mm.
And then slowly today I can say, I just don't care. I don't care about him. I'm living with the trauma that created, and there's things ingrained in me that to this day I have to work on, and I'll probably have to work on for most of my life. And
Yeah.
but he's no longer a part of that equation. And so once I got that diagnosis, I remember sitting in the parking lot and calling him and being like, "Dad, I'm ready." And I
Mm.
said, "Thank God. Thank God." We're crying on the phone together. I said, "I'm
Mhm.
gonna do it, Dad. I'm not backing down. Don't let me. Get me out of this." And so he prayed over me that I would be able to get out, because now we're in go mode planning. He My ex had found my money that I was saving. So he was getting clues, and I was getting stronger. So he tried to back me into a corner and do it again. And before he could grab me, he didn't expect this. I go, "You're gonna fucking back up." And I said, "You're never going to aggressively overpower me. You're never going to push me into a corner. So that's never happening again, or I'm out that fucking door." I
Yeah.
said it just like that. I said, "I will be gone in a second if you do that ever again." And that instilled the fear of the Lord in him. I ended up calling me, my mom, and was like, "I'm sorry, I want to kill myself." And that was the first time too that I called the bluff. My mom's that's emotional manipulation.
Mhm.
Tell me to call the cops or you can
Mhm.
call the ambulance. So I did. I said, "Okay, you clearly need help then. I'll call who I need to call." He didn't like that because he didn't plan on doing that. It was just a power tactic. And so
Right.
slowly I'm realizing these things. And then finally they take him away. And I'm given this gift of a whole month to, without
Mm.
him knowing, make sure that everything within this divorce is fixed, that I vacate the apartment. I get everything out of there, anything that he could use against me, all of it. I just have that amount of control, and then to make the right steps. He is harassing me, sending me the worst messages you could possibly imagine. I'm screenshotting everything. And my therapist walked me through it. And I think this is important for people to know. If you're with a narcissist, and an important part of trying to leave, if they're hoovering or they're harassing you, You send a text in writing, do it, not over the phone. Send a text first and say, "I'm asking for a blackout in communication. I don't wanna hear from you again. Maybe we can talk, but right now I'm asking for a blackout and you need to honor that." They're not gonna honor it. So then you have proof that they didn't honor it there. Then what my therapist had me do was send him a notarized letter
Mhm.
asking for a blackout in communication so that he had to sign for it when it arrived at his place, right? So he didn't like that. He didn't honor that. That really pissed him off. And so then we have the proof that we need to get the order of protection.
Mhm.
And not just for me, my whole family. And so I go in and I just tell them an iota of when I went there. And they said, "You're good. You don't even need to explain it anymore." They gave me the highest level of protection. And then another 2 years later, even though he had made fake accounts and stuff, they gave me another because of the potential. They knew it was that much of a threat.
Mhm.
And so and then the court order of protection, you can also pay a little extra to have the cops deliver it. We did that. And so
Mhm.
then the divorce papers, and in that time had just made sure everything went smoothly, and that I had to change where I lived, obviously a safe house. Nobody could know my address. I was like with a woman that was involved in like domestic violence situations, sweet lady. And then change my car. They wanted me to quit my job and change my or take down my social media. I Those were two things that made me feel like myself. So
Mhm.
I went through and I scrubbed it, and my job, I told them the situation, and so they had an underground garage that they had me go into that no one had access to, and I would be escorted to my car every night. And I'd have to check for tags on the car, air tags or whatever. Or I don't think they
Mhm.
had those at the time, trackers. I had to change make an alias of what I went by for a while. Everything about my life
Mhm.
changed, and that was hard because it was like a different kind of fear. And I was still so young. I was
Mhm.
23. And so from there, I've spent a decade really, I'm trying to think, maybe less than a decade, because 2017 is when I got diagnosed.
Mhm.
But since then, being given that information about his diagnosis and then continuing on to really understand the tactics of a narcissist and how to safely exit, and then learning about my state of
Mhm.
complex PTSD, and I'm sure you and I could talk for hours about that.
Yeah.
It's a huge thing that when you've gone through that significant amount of this duration of trauma, and even since childhood, it's very that's what in the process of unlearning it, like we said, that'll probably be a lifetime journey,
Yeah.
but it's so worth it. And in the beginning, in order to survive my marriage and my day-to-day life, because my reality was so twisted and insane. No human being can mentally withstand that. So I drank and I smoked tons of weed,
Mhm.
and it was my coping. And I felt so guilty for it. But even just a little, like I needed something and I didn't have access to anything else. And so I developed a problem with that, not during my marriage, but it got progressively worse. It was mostly after, but my therapist walked me through it and was like, you can thank alcohol. That's okay. Thank it because it's coping. And that's something I wanted to talk about too, is there's healing. And I think that's a lovely thing to talk about. But I also like to talk about coping, because
Mhm.
that's, like I said, that's the hanging on to the wreckage to get to shore, where it's just how do you cope with your reality? Because it's a mechanism of survival. And it's messy and sometimes it's not the healthiest of choices, but it is you saying, I want my life. I want to live.
Mhm.
And So even if it's on the most small basic level, having that fight in you enough, I think there's something so victorious about that's something I love. There's this band called Manchester Orchestra. I don't know if you've heard of them. The
Mhm.
Cope and the Hope album. So they've got it's this all the same songs. One is Cope and one is Hope. And I just thought that was beautiful, but each one, the songs are interpreted so differently, like different sounds. And I just love that messy struggle just as much as I like healing because I think sometimes we're not proud of that, but it was a huge deal for me to also be proud of what I did to survive.
Mhm.
And it doesn't always look like I'm
Pret
not a hero. I have had very messy coping mechanisms, and then I would grow out of them, but still be stuck with them. Or the situation would get better, but I was still stuck with these coping mechanisms. And so
Right.
that's a struggle. And went on to struggle with addiction, and it felt like I had all of this baggage. And I would say it's been in recent years where it's so much lighter. I don't feel like because I thought after that, I'm like, I'm probably gonna think about this every day for the rest of
Mhm.
my life. And I did for years. It would pop into my head every day. And then it didn't. And I don't know exactly when that happened, but it does get better.
Mhm.
You're not just I think the body knows how to heal itself and your mind knows how to protect itself. And
Mhm.
sometimes it overrides and prioritizes other things. Like when you're so used to being in constant survival, surveillance of your
Right.
surroundings, always trying to interpret cues and all of that.
Right.
It's hard for you. I remember my little hostess job, I struggled to
Mhm.
remember anything. And then that brought me back to my school days when I
Yeah.
couldn't. And
Yeah.
it's my brain was saying, we're not doing these menial tasks. You, my brain was telling me we're overqualified. We've been working on more important stuff. And
Mm.
that's the crazy thing is I think some people feel like slower in the head or like it's and it does rewire you. It is
Yeah.
brain damage technically, but it's also a beautiful thing that your brain is advocating for you too. Like
Yes,
it wants you to be
neuroplasticity
better.
is such a
Yeah,
gift. It's
it's
like
crazy.
the innate ability for our brains to heal themselves when we go through specific types of therapy or even do things, just learn to do things differently. I know that's been a huge thing for me. I had a lot of things in childhood that I never learned. Those
Mhm.
neural pathways were never developed. And so in my adulthood, after having my daughter, it was a really big focus of my early 20s to rewire my brain so that I could raise her differently because I just didn't have any of these normal instincts. And the instincts that
Mhm.
I did have were based out of trauma and fear and trying to just make sure that I was doing the thing I could do to survive and cope in all of the unhealthy ways. But I actually really love your perspective on honoring where you're at with the coping, even if it's not something that's like traditionally seen as healthy. I think sometimes we go through seasons in our lives where our coping mechanisms are simply tactics to survive. And we can honor the fact that we survived.
Mhm.
And although maybe in reflection, in hindsight, we wouldn't be like, "Yeah, go smoke a ton of weed and
Yeah.
drink a bunch of
Yeah,
alcohol. That's a great
definitely.
way to get through it." Like, we're not gonna necessarily advocate for that coping mechanism. We can
Right.
advocate for the fact that we did it, that you
Mhm.
got through that, that you did make the decision to leave, and then you have to learn how to carry that pain and grieve that relationship and grieve what that whole season of your life, that whole really first 23 years of your life where
Mhm.
you were shaped into a person that you didn't even really know. And now you have to figure out who you are. And so in that process, you use these substances. I did too. And there actually was some really good things that came from specifically with marijuana. Like there were times that I was
Mhm.
actually my brain was actually able to slow down
Yeah.
enough to be like, "Oh, wait, I'm not just constantly in a rush." Like I can for me, and I'm going to pivot here to creativity. For
Mhm.
me, I believe that the Lord actually used marijuana in my life to
Mhm.
slow my brain down enough and inspire me to create tangibly. So one thing that I went through a really trying time in 2019, and I share about it on the very first episode of my podcast. But there was just or actually at the end of 2020, I just was going through intensive trauma therapy. They found this mass on the top vertebrae of my spine, but they originally had told me it was on my
Mhm.
brain. We had gone through a lot of death. It was 2020. Everyone was in
Yeah.
state of disrepair. And then we were on the Dr. Phil show, and I was
Wow.
confronting my
You're
childhood
familiar
trauma.
with that? Wow.
It was like near the end. And I was confronting my trauma with my mom and my siblings on live television. And for me, it was, or not live television, but on national television. And for me, it wasn't a show. That was just a weird opportunity that came up for an intentional conversation that wasn't able to be had prior to that. And so it was a really hard, crazy time. But in that season is where this term creative processing was revealed to me. And what I realized was that creativity innately is a healing modality in and of itself. And so on this show, I love to highlight the concept of creative processing as we talk through our stories, because I believe that our life stories are the most powerful tool of connection that we have. And creative
Mhm.
processing is a powerful tool of healing that we have. And just the term, I'm going to go on my little soapbox here for a second, but
Mhm.
the term creative processing is a lot different. It's actually the opposite of the commonly known term, the creative process, because
Mhm.
the creative process leads to an external result, whereas creative processing leads to an internal result. And so it's not about how the actual thing that you've created turns out. That's not nearly as important as the transformation that can occur from the process of creating it. So, how do we actually do that? For me, it was revealed through this prompt. The purpose of enter whatever your creative outlet is. So, drawing, painting, it can even be cleaning your room. It could be making a spreadsheet. I believe every single person is creative. So, how
Mhm.
we activate our creative mind is going to look differently from person to person, and it can change too. But the purpose of enter your creative outlet is to process, enter your certain intention. So, during this time where I was going through a lot of deep healing for childhood things, it would sometimes look like the purpose of watercolor is to process Mother's Day and how painful Mother's Day was for me. And it was it was that process of pairing creativity with intention so that I could experience those positive emotions that I was inevitably seeking. But I had to go through the grief. I had to go through the pain. I had to feel through it. I'm a feeler, and I'm
Mhm.
also a healer. And so
Mhm.
creativity is like my healing superpower. So, anyway, all of that to say, when you set an intention for your creative abilities, you're using creative processing to gain clarity, to find hope, to reignite excitement, even on those tough days. It's a way to harness the creativity you already have to make progress, no matter how small. Simply showing up for yourself in this way is evidence of growth and resilience, and a reminder that you're moving forward even in challenging times. So, Allison, you shared with me that your primary creative processing method is drawing characters, which is a beautiful way to connect with yourself
Mhm.
and process emotions. But can you share with us how drawing has helped you to navigate and process through some of these more challenging moments in your life? And if you've noticed any shifts in your emotions or perspective when you approach it with a clear intention.
Mhm. Well, a few things to say about that. with certain things, and everybody has it, like you said, you arrive at this flow state. And I think everybody, like, we have access to that flow state, but we cut ourselves off from it. And I think we do that because of fear,
Yes.
fear of rejection, fear of not doing well. And I think getting into that natural flow state, you don't even know where you are. Like, you are
That's
just
right.
in it. You're so immersed in it, and it just comes out of you, and it's your best.
Yeah.
It's truly your best when you are able to access that place in your mind. I believe that's divine inspiration. You're not thinking about what you're doing it. And it comes from your spirit, deep in your soul. And so I think for me, that was my way of having my own world. And I would just have these dreams of these characters. And I think it was the drawing and then also the poetry. I have a lot of like work. I My goal is to publish a book of both. And both did different things for me. And I think with the poetry, it was like my code. It was how I could talk about what was happening without fear of someone finding it and me being in
Right.
trouble. It was my own language, really. And I think when I look back, it was me talking to myself. It's about things that I didn't even know I knew. Because, like I said, I was in that flow state.
Right.
So it was coming out of me. And there's a part of me, the observer, not the one chattering, but the observer of it all, of my experience, of my lifetime, knows what's going on. And again, realizing I have access to that all the time, that's a crazy thought, and I
Mhm.
still can't wrap my mind fully around that. But so that was the poetry, and then with my doodles, I would often my best work would be on a napkin or a scrap of paper. I actually got a tattoo of one of my
Oh, I wanna see
let's
it.
see it. I just got it, so it's fresh. Um,
Wow. Oh my
I don't know if you
goodness,
can see
Allison,
it,
that's amazing.
but this was one I made in 2015, and it represents trauma a lot to me and PTSD. Remember I said my head felt miles above
Yeah.
me, and but still this empathy, like this just gentle at heart creature at the bottom of it all. And so I would just find myself making these characters, and it's a lot like I also was so unable to connect with the world around me because, like I said, I didn't have a lot of social interaction, and it was just really hard for me to connect at that point. And I'm someone that really, I mean, we all need connection, but I crave it.
Yeah.
And it was like my way of having friends. That sounds very silly, like imagining a friend, but it was like I could feel these like they become such a deep part of me
Right.
that I know them all and they live in my head. And so it was just me taking my experience and putting it somewhere, and it would just come out of me. If I try to think too hard, or
Yeah.
it doesn't work for me. It's a very precious state to access. And another thing I wanted to say, for a long time, I believed, and I think we do this there's an awesome quote I'll send you later,
Yeah.
but it speaks about Van Gogh and how he used to eat yellow paint, and people say that he did that to be happy, and they romanticize his depression.
Mm.
And often we think that our best work comes out of depression, addiction, the things that plague us, that our best work is because of that. And I don't believe that. And that's what the quote goes on to say is we make our best work when we're healing.
Mm.
And
That's right.
and that rings true to me because I do. And
Mhm.
yes, I still had access to that place within these dark times, But the best things that have come out of me were out of that spirit of it's very vulnerable, but
Mhm.
I'm letting myself heal from this and I'm using this to heal. I'm not like staying in
Yeah.
my just simmering with my hurt.
You're
And
letting it move through you.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hey there, friends. Are you ready to rise fully into your calling as a leader? I want to introduce you to Heart Soul Strength, a ministry dedicated to equipping leaders like you to serve with purpose, resilience, and joy, fully aligned with God's will for your life and the people you have specifically been called to lead. Whether you are leading a company from your home while you're raising small kids, or you're the leader of a Fortune 500 company, I want to personally invite you to our first immersive event, the Rise Leadership Conference, happening November 12th through 14th, 2025, in Waco, Texas, at the stunning Deerfield Estates, just 10 minutes from downtown Waco. This will be a weekend of worship, actionable workshops, connections, networking, and fellowship with women who share the same anointing on their lives, but maybe at different levels. It's designed to recharge your heart, soul, and strength, and to empower you to lead with clarity and confidence. So, whether you're able to join us in person or simply just want to support the mission of Heart Soul Strength, where we are called to equip leaders, your donation makes a difference. Visit heartsoulstrength.org to learn more, to donate, or to grab your ticket to Rise. Let's rise into leadership the way that God intended, together. You are created worthy, and through Him, you have the heart, soul, and strength to make a kingdom impact in whatever role you're serving in. God's got you, and you got this.
And not to say that those things don't influence your art, like they do. I think
Right.
your whole experience does, but
Yeah.
that's the beauty too of the human experience is if I was talking to God or universe or whomever and they told me, you get to live a human life, but if you're in it, if you want to do it, you're going to have to suffer too. But
Mhm.
you're going to have the full spectrum and you can't have one without the other. And
Yes.
you're also going to have the highest highs and the best joy and love and all of this. You're going to have access to all of that. And I think that I would choose that. And I
Mhm.
think maybe I like to think that my soul did.
Yeah,
And
I
it
think it
it
did.
chose this life. And then I go back to that statement I made at the beginning. Like things are happening for me and not to me. And when there's I repeat this mantra a lot, and it is what the universe has for me will find me and it cannot be taken away from me.
Right.
And I think that when I'm in that mindset, then everything that comes along, I welcome it because I know that that I'm going to get where I need to be. And I have seen through this recent tragedy when I was carjacked, kidnapped, and almost toast,
Yes.
the violence of that was hopefully the worst kind of violence I'll ever experience in my life.
Yeah.
Um, it and violence, I think, is such a perversion of humanity because
Mm.
it's like cancer. It's cell against cell. It's human against human, and I don't think we're meant for that. And so it feels like, if you want to talk in terms of religion, like the deepest and violating one's
Mhm.
temple, body, whatever.
Yeah.
And so it hurt like a different way. Like
Yeah.
I just told you about a lot of trauma, a little
Yeah.
trauma dump, but it
Go
hurt
for it.
different. And it's hard to explain, but it was that invasion and that lack of humanity that I saw. And honestly, the feeling of I this time around I didn't accept death. I said, no, I'm going to
Yeah.
fight this time. And that's crazy because I was
Yeah.
so conditioned to just and there were moments where that was my main defense mechanism,
Yeah.
was to submit and cooperate. And because that's what I've learned works.
Yeah.
Smooth it over. But towards the end, I had that moment where it's, I can let this happen or I can fight.
Yeah.
And doesn't matter what the odds are. I just made that decision. I made it in a split second. And I said, I'm not going down. And I held on to that wheel. And because I knew when they got me out of the car,
Yes.
it
So
was,
before we get into the like weeds of this last story, I
yeah,
do just want to share for the people who haven't seen you on TikTok. I actually saw a
there's
reel
no
on
context.
Instagram. I actually saw a reel on Instagram. I think it was somebody had reshared your story or something, and I want to hand over the mic again to you to just give a very high level
Breathe.
overview. But I also want to just tell people from the forefront that she goes into the details of the story. She has a series on TikTok, and I really highly encourage you go and watch that series because not only she talks so much about many of the different things we talked about here, but she shared an entirely different story on there as far as another narcissistic relationship that she was in. And I don't believe you shared this one specifically on there, did you?
My marriage, what I
Yes.
discussed in this, I started a new series called A Series of Unfortunate Events, and I want it to be like a trauma dump, but like
Yeah.
lighthearted at the same time because
Yeah.
you gotta laugh. Like you have to remain light and you have to, now when I recap it, it's not from this place of that deep sorrow or
Despair.
even touching that subject, just, you know,
Yeah.
and I made that decision even with this recent trauma.
Yeah.
And yeah, I want people to know it's not all doom and gloom and
No, I
woe is
actually
me, but
learned a lot because you share so many of and you did it on this podcast as well, where you shared the learnings of that you've learned through your healing process, the things specifically that your therapist was teaching you, or the ways that your dad and your mom supported you, or the things that your brother said. There's so many different details in the threads of your story that are also very inspiring, which is why I love Created Worthy, is because we just are able to say, I don't know exactly what part of my story. There's no way on a single podcast
mm,
episode that we can get into every single
yeah.
portion, but whatever comes up, it to me, it's meant to be shared because there's someone on the receiving end who will be inspired or healed, or they will be like, they will receive what is meant to be received for them just through the sharing of the stories. But that's what you do on your TikTok in that first series, Kidnapped, Beaten, and Almost Toast, which again, I told her at the beginning of this, but that is like just such a catchy way to sum up her story. But I'm telling
I'll
you,
make
friends,
t-shirts,
yes, we need some t-shirts. Let me know if you need some help making
some
swag. I
toast.
got you. Toast, yes. But seriously, what she went through was absolutely insane, and it was a one-time event. It happened in her town where she lives, and again, I'm going to let her recap that, but I also just want to say go get the full version of the story
Yeah.
on her TikTok. So,
Yeah.
anyway, all of
I
that
would
to say,
say
can
that.
you sum
And you
up
know,
for us?
yeah, and I love that you appreciate that I spoke about the relationship I was in at the time too, my getting out of that, because that was important to me. And I had a lot of people that were confused by it. They're like, what's the relevant? Get to the story, get to the real,
But that was
they just
part of your
want
story.
the sensationalized version. But
Yeah.
the people, like you said, if you're speaking from that flow space of
Yeah.
in this trust that your words will find the right person, that there is a reason that I don't think about my TikToks. I just get on there for better or for worse. And I just say what's on my heart. I don't have a script. Like I didn't know anything that I was doing. But I think those parts were just as important to me. And so I didn't stop sharing them, even when people are like,
Yeah.
okay, let's get, because there were people like you, there was numerous, like uncountable, the amount of people that were like, thank you. This is me. This is exactly what I'm going through. People that paragraphs and paragraphs of them getting vulnerable. And that right there is the juice. That is what, if any impact that I have on this world is to make those places where we can get real, we can get raw, and we can be vulnerable without fear.
Yeah.
Because fear of rejection and fear of being unlovable and fear of real danger, whatever it is, that keeps us from all of the gifts. And so I think a huge way that we break down those walls of fear is through each other,
Mhm.
because it's the two most comforting words in the world to hear when you hear me too, because it's okay, we connect. Then that's what being a human is about to me. We share experiences. But
Yeah.
back to the story, and this will be super brief, but I was going about my day and I went to the corner store across the street. Two strangers, initially two strangers, I asked them for a dime, like a actual dime, not
Yeah. Literally
chucks.
10 cents.
Yeah, literally 10 cents.
Yeah.
And at first they were, no, and this big girl, I call her in my story, but now she's named, just like hitting him. No. And I'm like, oh, it's fine. I'm just gonna go to my car. Don't sweat. And they used that as it was like bing. And they ended up creating a situation so that they could get to my car. They get in and they tell me, yeah, if you want to make it back alive, then you're going to do what we say and you're going to drive. And it's supposed to be right down the road. It wasn't. And so it was a ride from hell. And hopefully that will make the other parts that I was talking about, the context, better. But basically they ended up picking up another girl that I call wifey in the series and having me dish. Got lots of running around. And then it got to the last stop and I had this sense, I felt the energy shift. And I just said, this is it. Because they're not going to drop me off at my
Right.
house after they kidnap me and they're taking my car. That doesn't happen. And so, what are they going to do? And it was just like, there's so many parts of the story, ups and downs, and things that I would have changed and things. But I think that's also, it's been encouraging to hear from people like, girl, nobody knows how they would react
Yeah.
unless they've been through something like that. And it's true. You just don't know. I would have thought I'd handle it a million different ways. And they spotted that they could take me. I don't have street smarts. And their greed, I think, in the end, protected me
Mhm.
because the man that was involved was going to sexually assault me and they didn't want to share, so they made me drop him off. And they didn't include other people because they were greedy. They wanted this car to themselves. So I was afraid that other people too were going to be like a gang. And because they had driven to stopped at a couple places with their crew. And so I was just waiting every stop. This is it. And then at the last one, I was like, no, this is it. And it was just a dark street, no one around. It looks like the type of place you'd murder someone.
Yeah.
And that was their plan. And they were texting and being sketchy. And she pretended to go into this last house and get drugs. And then she came back and I had that split set. I did not have time. I turned on the car. She whacked me and told me to turn it off, and I knew that was weird. And so I knew I had it was she was going through her pockets, buying time. When someone's like
Yeah.
buying time, you can tell she's not looking for something. She's just going like this. And I say, "Do you need me to turn on the light?" Like, I was just
Yeah.
trying to stall. And then I go, "Okay, this is it. I have nothing to lose." So I go and I push the ignition and I keep trying to put it in drive,
Yeah.
and she's just socking me like over and over again. And I'm hanging on to consciousness, but I don't want them to get me out of this car because I know they're gonna kill me. And I'm trying to hang on and I keep trying to start it, but she's just punching me so hard. The girl in the back's holding me down. And then they end up dragging me out and holding me. And by this point, my face was just, you'll see the picture if you go on my TikTok,
Mm.
and couldn't see very well. And I just bit down on someone's arm and as hard as I could. And I ran away and didn't get help for the most part. And then I did. And
Yeah.
so that's that.
Yes.
Condensed a lot.
Yes, that was a
At the
very
same
condensed version.
time, the following week, I broke up with a narcissist. It was a shorter relationship, but really impacting and impactful. And that was very relevant to me because this situation unlocked something in me.
Mhm.
And that's going back to this idea that it happened for me and not to me.
Right.
So, because this happened, wheels started turning, veils were lifted, and I said, "I don't have to take shit.
Yeah.
Take no shit, do no harm." I said, "I'm out of here." Like, she accused me. She made it quite easy. She told me, "You're cheating on me," like, all narcissist stuff because she's
Yeah.
cheating on me,
Yeah.
so I'm cheating on her, right? "You're relapsing, you're doing like, just trying to make anything up, just terrible to me. Just on my
Mhm.
face, terrible. No human being, a friend wouldn't do that.
Mhm.
Like an enemy of me wouldn't do that. Like it was
Right.
so aggressive and terrible. And just I was thinking like, I'm not gonna go through a breakup and this in the same day. Like that sucks.
Yeah.
But I knew it was happening. And I remember I had a little folder, and at first I had BPD because she told me she had BPD. And I was
Yeah.
like, I can deal with that. Like a lot of people have BPD. And I think I was trying to prepare for that. Like,
Yeah.
because I just found that out 3 months in. And then I'm getting all this narcissist stuff. And that's sticking out. And I have extensive knowledge of it. But I'm like, God damn it, I'm in it again. I just start looking at these things and I'm like, oh, this just resonates too hard. And then I changed the folder to am I being abused? And the answer was
Mm.
yes. And getting out of that was a big part of it for me for that reason. I uncovered it. So many things. I also talk about my current girlfriend. I would have never found her. She was living can't say this, but she was living across the street from me. Cut that out.
Okay.
But she was right there, and I never would have she never would have reached out and said the most encouraging, empathetic, authentic things that just stuck in my head because that
Yeah.
would have never happened. So many little details. I could
Yeah.
go on about so many little things that would not have happened. So it happened for me and not to me.
Yeah.
And if I had to go back and I had the choice of whether or not it happened, I would 100% let it happen again. I wouldn't be enthusiastic about it, but I would.
As long as you knew the outcome, which you do. Yes. I am just so proud of you for sharing your story here and so honored that you would just carve out the time and space in your life to share some of what you've been through with my audience before we close out. Can you just tell us a little bit about what's coming up next for you in your life and how we can best support you and connect with you going forward?
So moving forward, I was on my way to becoming a full-time artist again. And I had pieces prepared for a show. And so this obviously put a halt to a lot in my life, and it makes it hard to go outside. And I'm right where this happened. And so I'm having trouble connecting. So connecting with me on TikTok, if it's a word on there, it's wherever. And every message matters to me. It- I try to respond to literally everyone. It bans me from making comments but it just, it is sometimes it's one word from somebody that's okay. It just gets you through that next moment. And so I'm so appreciative to everybody that like supports and resonates and tells their stories. That's so meaningful to me. And I'm trying to currently, I don't know, it's a weird month to move, but I'm trying to break a lead. I'm trying to get out of the city because I don't think I can like properly heal right now with how fresh this is. And
Yeah.
it's just, it's constant. And I just need big time help. And so
Yeah.
I
Do you
also
have
want
a
to be doing
GoFundMe?
intensive therapy. I do.
Okay, because
Yes.
I would love to link in our show notes your GoFundMe account. I know that it can be really awkward to ask for money
Yeah.
or to be like, I really
Thanks
need
for doing
help.
that.
Yes, I got you, girl. But yeah, I totally get that. I'm the same way when it's like me or my life. I actually just launched a nonprofit ministry for leaders so that I believe that we're in a season where we need leaders to rise up. But in order for leaders to rise up, they need to be equipped well. And so I just started this nonprofit and I recorded an episode earlier this week and was like, I am not the money girl. I do not know how to talk about this.
I
But
get so awkward.
so awkward, me too. But I
Yeah.
could do it for other people. And I would love, love, love to link your GoFundMe in the show
Yeah.
notes so that we can hopefully
I have
raise
a
some support for you.
GoFundMe and my Venmo is the same as my username, Bacon
Amazing.
Blues.
We will
But
link both your
yeah,
GoFundMe
those
and your
that would
Venmo.
be helpful. I am planning on opening up commission orders, so that would be custom work, whether it's acrylic paintings, and I'm soon a video. Oh, by the time this video airs, this podcast
Yeah.
airs, I will have a lot more options up. But what's coming in the future is, yeah, taking commissions because I that's so special to me. I love
Yeah.
being able to like take somebody's likeness and story and personality and just
Yeah.
create something that really is true to that. And just selling art that I already have and that I
Yes.
was working on for the show. I want to do like a virtual art show. And so,
Yes,
yeah,
give me
I'm
all of
working all
those
that.
details when you have them, and we will update the show notes even if it happens after.
Awesome.
Just give me all of the links to all the things. I personally am really encouraged or inspired by you and want to support you however I can. And I just am excited to support you. I'm excited for my listeners to support you. I know that we're also looking at going to maybe a treatment place or getting some intensive
Yeah.
therapy through a facility you've gone to in the past.
EMDR and
Yeah.
Sarasat, I'll plug that as well.
Yeah.
There's so many different methods, but yeah, I don't know if Sarasat is lesser known, but it's a non-invasive brainwave technology. Help your brain, both hemispheres communicate to get you out of fight or flight,
Yeah.
as well as EMDR. And it's you gotta find the right person, but intensive EMDR is so great. I would recommend it if you haven't had it for complex
Yeah.
PTSD. You really have to have because think about it. It's like being on the operating table and then it's okay, see you next week, and your guts are hanging out. Like you can't
Right.
have that. And so I loved the consistency. It was like 6 hours a day of EMDR going
Mm.
through and when I tell you I had a reoccurring nightmare every day since my marriage. It was gone, just gone.
Mm.
And so my quality of life enhanced in such a way. And I've got night terrors and I've got all of that. So huge plug to
Yes.
EMDR. It doesn't work for
Yes.
everyone. There's so many methods, but
Right.
if you
But
find the
you
right
know that
person,
has worked for you. And so
yeah,
that would be incredible if you could experience that again and go through that for this specific trauma and then all that you've gone through on the
honestly.
relational end. So, yes, we're going to link all of the things. I am going to
Yeah.
continue supporting you and following you on TikTok. I'm really not a TikTok user, so that in itself was like a weird thing for me. I was like, hey,
Yeah.
I'm going to message you on here, but girl, I
I'm
probably won't
so glad
reply.
you found me,
I'm
and
so grateful
you
too.
got my number now, so I'm
Yes,
a
yes.
huge fan. You made a fan out of me, and
Oh,
you're just a
ditto, my
delightful
friend.
human, and you're making an
Thank you.
enormous impact. I love you just get it. The things that you pick out, and
Thank you.
it really resonates. Your character is it's a light, and
That is
I've
such a
enjoyed
huge
talking
encouragement.
with you and
Yes,
hearing
I know. We have to stay in
what
touch.
your intentions are and your goal. Yeah,
Mm.
I'm
We
invested.
Me too. So we'll stay in touch. But before you leave, I just want to leave you with a little bit of final encouragement. Allison, your story of transforming pain into compassion and using art and your voice to inspire healing is nothing short of remarkable. It's a miracle. Your ability to lead with authenticity and vulnerability creates a safe space for others to embrace their own journeys and find hope in the midst of pain and struggle. I am deeply honored to share your incredible resilience and unwavering empathy with the world. Keep creating, connecting, and championing the beauty of human strength. You are making an incredible impact simply by being unapologetically you. You, my friend, are created worthy.
Hey, friend. Thank you for listening to my story on the Created Worthy podcast. I hope you feel heard, seen, and worthy. You got this.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to the Created Worthy podcast. I hope that today's show resonated with you. And if it did, can you do me a huge favor and go leave a 5-star review? This helps more listeners find the show and it expands the reach of the stories and concepts that are shared here. All the links and guest information are in the show notes. And if you're on social media, come hang out with me. You can find the Created Worthy podcast on both Instagram and Facebook. Or come follow along with my personal IG page where I just share more about the real, sometimes messy life of your fellow worthy warrior. Can't wait to talk to you soon, friend. And don't forget, we are all created worthy.